Welcome to Main Street Mavericks Radio, bringing you insights and strategies of exceptional Main Street businesses serving friends and neighbors in their communities as educators and advocates for their customers. Here's your host, marketing and lead generation strategist and best-selling author, Donna Gunter.
Today's show topic is one that everyone wishes to avoid, but it's a reality of life. You know the saying, there are only two certainties in life, death and taxes. Some people choose to ignore the reality of taxes and then incur a massive tax debt. There are so many myths about tax debt and how to resolve it, and as such, it's all too easy for innocent taxpayers to be scammed by large tax firms charging outrageous fees for something that can be easily done themselves. Today we're going to talk about the common myths and realities of tax debt negotiation to make taxpayers more aware of what is and what isn't possible. Today's guest, Amanda Bodkin, is a certified enrolled agent with the Internal Revenue Service and has over 10 years' experience in the tax industry. She's also the author of the new book, Win the IRS Game, a step-by-step guide to negotiating your IRS tax debt. Having worked at one of the largest tax resolution firms in the nation for a number of years, she left to spend time with her family. It was during this sabbatical that the idea for the book, Win the IRS Game, came to her. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna.
Well, this is a really interesting topic because people either love or hate the IRS, and so working for the IRS, I'm sure you got that attitude a lot during your tenure there.
Yes, I don't work for the IRS. I'm certified by the IRS.
Okay, got it. I wasn't quite sure what the enrolled agent was, if that meant you actually worked for them or worked kind of as a contractor for them. So
yes,
I'm glad we got that cleared up.
Yeah, I was going to say most people are confused about what an enrolled agent is. I'm constantly explaining what an enrolled agent is. It means that we have passed several series of tests that the IRS gives to prove that we know what we're doing, and they give us a certification, which gives us unlimited practice rights in front of the IRS through audits, negotiations, all the way to tax court if you can get certified up to that level.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, let's talk about this whole notion of tax debt. Give us a little bit of background about how people would accrue a tax debt, and then let's talk about some of the common myths when it comes to tax debt negotiations.
Okay. Well, obviously one of the biggest reasons I see, the most common reasons of why people owe tax debt is what they're claiming throughout the year. They don't claim enough. They don't have enough withheld, and then at the end of the year, they do their tax return and they find out that they owe. Another big reason for owing, which is very, very common, is you take a withdrawal from your 401k and they don't have enough taxes withheld out of that withdrawal. And on top of that withdrawal, there is also a penalty that goes along for early withdrawal, and they don't estimate for that.
So you're not really talking about people who are avoiding paying taxes and accrue tax debt that way. You're talking about people that may have done their due diligence and for whatever reason either can't pay what they owe or just haven't paid enough.
Correct. I mean, of course, you always get the ones that are trying to avoid paying their taxes. I've seen many of those cases, but I don't deal specifically with tax protesters is what they're called, people who are specifically trying to avoid, because that can get into the criminal side of tax evasion.
Okay, got it. So what are some of the common myths when it comes to tax debt negotiations?
A lot of the common myths are that you can't do it yourself, and that's just not true. A lot of people get very overwhelmed, and it can be done yourself as long as you know what you're looking for, if you know your tax rights. And a lot of these big tax firms will come up with big fancy names for what they're going to do for you, when in actuality all they're doing is filing a financial form and making a phone call. And those are all things that you can do yourself, because nobody knows your financial situation better than you do. So you're in a better position to handle your tax debt case than anybody else.
So can you take us through, I guess, a common scenario? Let's go back to the 401k scenario where somebody has withdrawn that and, they're not able to pay the tax debt on that withdrawal, how would the IRS contact somebody, and what should they do in that situation?
Okay. Well, you take the withdrawal from your 401k, and say you tell your broker, yes, withhold taxes. Well, your broker is going to withhold about 10%. That's common. That's average. However, it's generally not enough. You usually want to have about 20% withheld. But say you get that 10% withheld, and you think, okay, well, I had taxes withheld. I'm not going to owe. Well, on top of the additional 10% that you should have had withheld, you get that tax penalty. So you file your tax return, you find out that you have a balance due, and you file your return. The first thing you want to do is sit down and determine what your budget is. What can you do if you can't pay the full amount? What can you do monthly? And once you have determined that, before the IRS even contacts you, you want to be proactive. You want to contact them first. You'll have a much favorable position if you contact them before they contact you. But if you don't contact them, you're going to get a notice. It's what is called their friendly notice. It's a CP 504. And it's going to say, you have a tax bill due in 30 days. Please pay all at once. And that's what you can expect to receive.
And so should you respond before you get that notice? Is that what you're saying, that the IRS would deal more favorably with you, or just respond immediately upon that notice?
You mainly want to contact them before you get that notice. You will get a much favorable response, but as long as if you get that notice, if you respond right then, that's okay too. But you really want to try and be proactive with it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about then this whole notion of negotiating your own tax debt regardless of what you owe. Obviously, you've talked about it's possible to do that. Walk through how that might happen, once you've gotten this notice, or once you've decided to make the call to the IRS.
Okay. Well, there's various programs that the IRS has, and they're all dependent on what you owe. There's caps on each program as to what you can negotiate for. Let's say we're back to the 401k, and you owe less than $25,000. Well, that's very easy. You give them a call. They call it their streamlined agreement, where you don't have to submit any financial information to them. You just have to determine what you can afford monthly. They allow for 72 months, and you offer a monthly payment that will cover your tax debt over that 72 months. They will accept it right away. Now, say you owe over $25,000, but it's before $50,000. Similar scenario, except you do have to give small financial information, and it does have to be set up on direct debit. But again, it's just a phone call. You don't have to submit any paperwork. You don't have to submit anything except for answer a few financial questions, because all their financial questions are going to do is make sure you can afford the monthly payment that you're proposing. Now, say you owe over $50,000. That's where you're going to have to file a financial form. It's called a 433A. It's about 2 to 4 pages, depending on the assets that you have. If you don't have much, then it's only going to be about 2 pages. And you just list out, this is what my monthly income is, this is the assets that I have, this is the debt that I have. And you submit that with a monthly payment request. And that form goes all the way up to even if you owe $250,000, $350,000, $400,000.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It is much simpler than I ever dreamed that it would be in terms of dealing with the IRS. You always have these visions of it being just a nightmarish process.
Yes, and it can be if you get to the point where you've just ignored them for so long that you have someone knocking on your door. But if you are proactive about your situation, it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, I know one thing that people fear around the IRS is having the IRS attach a lien to their property or to bank accounts or what have you. Can you talk a little bit about what exactly is a lien and how it might differ from a levy?
Yes, actually I can. A lien is very, very different from a levy. A lien is where the IRS will file a lien against your Social Security number, and then it attaches to real property. They're not filing it against your home per se, they're filing it against you, and then it attaches to anything that you own. They're not coming to take your house, which is a very big misconception with a lien, is they're like, oh, they're coming to take my house. No, they're not doing that. What they're doing is if you were to sell that home, then any profit from that sale would go to the IRS right away. They don't file liens on your bank account or your wages. That's not a lien. That's a levy. That's a garnishment.
Ah, okay.
That's the big difference between the two. When they see lien, people automatically think they're coming to take my house, my bank, my wages. No. A lien is just saying they have a collection against you. A levy is where they attach to your bank accounts, your wages, things like that. And that's far down in the collection process. That's if you have not been proactive and you have just ignored them, that's when you're going to get a levy.
So with a lien, are they attaching it to everything that you own, which would include house, car, boats, RVs, all four-wheelers, anything, or motorcycles, anything that can be registered?
Yes, anything that you already have a loan on or anything that has big value to it, an asset to it. So say you have a house, say you have a boat, say you have a motorcycle, anything like that that you can sell for a generous profit, they can attach a lien to that. But again, it's against you, the person, your Social Security number. So anything you own that's registered under your Social Security number will have that lien attached to it.
And at what point are you at when the IRS starts to levy a lien or levy a levy against you? What's happened to get you to that point?
You're pretty far in the collection process at that point if you're getting a levy notice, meaning there is a cycle to the IRS, and it's all on a timeline. You're going to get several notices before you even get to that levy. There's a three notice cycle that you go through. The first one is the friendly notice that we talked about that automatically gets sent out when you file with a balance due. The second one is a little less friendly but not as threatening, and it'll say, hey, we haven't heard from you, trying to get you to contact them. Now, on that notice, it will say intent to levy your state refund. A lot of people don't see that state refund. If you don't have a state refund, they're not going to take any action. The third notice is going to say final notice of intent. That's where they're saying, hey, this is what we're going to do if you don't respond to us. And they list out lien, levy, things like that. Now, you probably won't hear anything after that for about 8 months. After that time, then you're going to hear something. It's going to be about a 10-page notice saying, okay, we're serious now, pretty much. We're going to do this if we don't hear from you. And at that point, that's when they're going to start to levy you.
And so do you get notice if your bank accounts are attached or your wages are garnished, or does that just start to happen? I mean, is your bank notifying you? Will your employer notify you?
Well, the IRS is legally required to notify you prior to doing it, but that's that letter that you get at the 8-month mark saying, hey, we're serious. That's
okay. Them
notifying you that they're going to take these actions. They only have to give you that notice once per tax year that you owe for. So if they've already issued that notice, they may not levy you right away. It could be months, it could be a year, it could be in 2 weeks. But once you get that notice, they can take those levy actions. You won't get a notice from your bank account at all until after the fact.
Ah, okay. Well, so all these things we see on television then about the sheriff or the police showing up at your house to auction your possessions is all just television fantasy then?
It can be, unless, of course, you're into the criminal tax evasion side or you owe,
okay.
I'm talking 6 figures, close to $1 million, and you have a revenue officer. At that point, yes, then they can show up, but that's if you've completely ignored them and you have been just avoiding them altogether.
And that's probably not likely to happen for average Joe taxpayer.
Right. For average Joe taxpayer, that's probably not going to happen.
So once your wages have been garnished or there's a lien placed on your property, how do you get that situation? Is that something you can do still by yourself at that point, or is it time to hire an attorney or someone else to help you?
No, you can still handle it on your own, even once you get a garnishment or a bank levy or a lien. Again, it falls under how much do you owe and which program will work for you. If you are in that $25,000 range, it's a phone call. You set up that payment arrangement, they'll release it immediately. Same with the $50,000 range. It's a phone call. You answer a couple of questions, you set it up, and they'll release it right away. Same with the financial. If you owe over $50,000, you submit it, they approve it, it'll be released. So you can still handle it even if you're at that point. The one time that you really want to seek professional assistance from an attorney or an enrolled agent or a CPA is when you are looking at a revenue officer. Because revenue officers, when you fall on their desk, meaning you've owed for a long time and have ignored them, they're not going to be as kind. They're going to look for how can they get what you owe as fast as possible. That's when you really want to seek professional advice, is when you have a revenue officer. But if you don't have a revenue officer, it's still always something you can handle on your own.
Wow, who knew that the IRS could be kind and gentle and not as mean as portrayed in the media?
Right.
Well, this is wonderful information, Amanda. So what led you to write Win the IRS Game?
It was because I did work for a large tax firm for many years, and I would see the same clients over and over again. Not the same one, but the same stereotypical clients, same issues, same reasonings that they owed, and the same questions over and over again. And there was never one place, one book, one web page, one blog that I could send them to that could answer all of their questions. And I always wanted there to be something like that. I mean, yes, I could send them to irs.gov and they could try and wade through the 200
good luck
pages.
With that.
But exactly, they'd just leave more confused than when they started. So I really wanted to do something that could help these people just have all of that information right at their fingertips.
So it sounds like in the book you've translated the IRS legalese and, stuff that normal people probably would not understand of reading it to common everyday standard information that anybody with a fifth grade reading level could understand and put into practice.
Exactly. I really broke it down step by step so that anybody can understand it, anyone can do it, and it would be a very easy process for them.
Well, what can listeners expect to find inside the book if they purchase that?
Well, inside the book, they'll find a chapter in and of itself just on common IRS notices and really explaining what the notices say. That way they can understand it, because notices, the way they're worded, sound very scary when they're really not. They can find that. I also put in samples of all of the forms that they'll need. So when they look for the forms that they need to do their agreement, they'll know what they're looking for. And I break down step by step how to fill out those forms.
Wow, that is really great information for people to have when they're in that situation. If the listeners wanted to find more information or help regarding their own tax debt without worry of being taken advantage of, where can they go? What can they do? What's their first step?
Well, there's several different places that they can start. Obviously, there is irs.gov that they could start, but again, they could leave more confused than when they started. But then there's also Taxpayers Advocate, who is through the Internal Revenue Service. They're a separate division where they're really on your side, pretty much. They look at each individual case. If you don't want to go through Taxpayer Advocate, there are other options. Go to your local CPA, your local enrolled agent to get information. They can also go to Tax Connections, where there's just all sorts of industry professionals on there to answer questions. Or they can also visit my site, and I list a lot of information on my site that's free to them, which is they can go to lhitaxservices.com, which is my company, or they can go to wintheirsgame.com, which is my book, if they want more information without having to fork over any money.
Well, I noticed one thing you didn't list in terms of resources were the tax resolution firms. Talk a little bit about that and the pros and cons of using a tax resolution firm. I see commercials on television all the time. You know, oh, do you owe over $10,000 in tax debt? You know, call such and such firm, you know, and we will help you take care of this. So I'm assuming that's the kind of tax resolution thing you're talking about.
Yes, and I don't like mentioning tax resolution firms as a place to get advice because there are some good ones. I'm not even going to say that there's not. There are some good resolution firms, but you really need to do your homework on them before you contact them and before you agree. But most big tax resolution firms, when you call them initially, you are not speaking with a tax professional. You are speaking with a salesman, and it's very boiler room atmosphere. They're very scripted, and they have every answer under the sun to get you to sign on with them. They offer a free review. However, again, you're not talking with a professional. You're speaking with a sales agent who's just trying to sell you. When you contact a tax resolution company, a good way to find out if they are legit is match the name on any forms that they send you as their tax professional. Make sure it's the person who's actually going to be working your case. If it doesn't match, run very fast.
Well, how do those firms make money? I mean, if you're signing on with them and they're helping you pay the IRS, I mean, they're a business, so what's in it for them? How are they getting paid?
Astronomical fees. Astronomical fees. For example, for a streamlined agreement where it's just a phone call, that's all they're doing, you can expect to pay in some of these. I've seen, because I've called around to various ones as I was doing research on them, $3,000. It's a phone call.
Wow.
Right. That's where they're making their money.
So it sounds like then they're really taking advantage of consumers' fears about the IRS to put money in their pockets.
They really are. They really are. They play on that fear because fear is a big motivator for people, and they play on that. And I actually even address that in my book is this is how it should go with a reputable company. If it doesn't go this way, then you will be scammed. And because I wouldn't be able to sleep with myself at night if I tried some of the stuff that they do.
Wow, so there it sounds like many of them are on the same level as the payday loan people, you know, which I refer to as loan sharks. Yes, they can be considered that way. Now, luckily, as of this year, OPA, which is the Office of Professional Accountability, who oversees all of our tax professionals in our industry, all enrolled agents, they are looking into all of those companies. So there's going to be a lot more regulation coming this year. So you'll see a lot more fall off of those scam firms because under the IRS and their rules governing us, there are certain things we can and cannot say. There are certain things we can and cannot do. And OPA oversees all of that, all of the disciplinarian actions, even up to removing our licenses if need be. Prior to this year, there has been no regulation in our industry whatsoever. Starting this year, they are getting more involved. So hopefully, my hope is that with them getting more involved and with more regulation coming, you'll see a lot of these scam firms dying off and going away. So you won't have to worry about that as much, hopefully. Well, I guess, you know, regulation always comes about when there are some people out there who are trying to game the system, and obviously there have been a number out there trying to game the system, so in comes the regulations to fix that, which is an unfortunate side effect of people who want to screw other people. But I guess that's just human nature to some degree.
Yes, unfortunately it is, but at least my hope is that, you know, with this regulation, it will get better, and then there won't be a need to worry about, those commercials that you see. And speaking of those commercials, those ones who say penny on the dollars, we are not allowed to say that under regulations. That phrase is not allowed to be uttered from a reputable company. So if they even mention pennies on the dollar, run. They're a scam.
Wow. So I guess that's kind of leading into another myth. Is tax debt ever settled for some amount lower than what you actually owe through a negotiation process, or is it typically settled for exactly what the IRS says that you owe, unless you can have financial documents that prove otherwise?
Yes, actually, it can be settled for less. It's very difficult, though. It is very hard. In all of my years of doing this, I have had some success. It's called an offer and compromise program. I have had some, but again, I won't attempt it if I don't think they qualify. There are big qualifications on an offer and compromise. It's a mathematical equation of this is what you owe, this is what you make over this amount of time, this is your offer. And if you don't qualify, then it won't work. But yes, it is possible if you fall under their qualifications. For example, say you owe $150,000. You do not own a home. You are retired on Social Security, and you took out money from your retirement before 59 and a half, which is an early distribution. You don't have much in monthly. You're not going to be going back to work. You don't have the ability to go back to work. The amount that the IRS could reasonably receive would be roughly $25,000 max, based off of all of your assets and what you make over time. You can offer that $25,000, and as long as that is accurate, they will accept that, because if they reasonably can prove that that's all they're going to get, they will settle.
Well, that sounds like a much more reasonable resolution than the senior sitting in his house fearing that, the house, well, I guess if he doesn't own the house, I guess he doesn't have to fear about it being taken away, but, fearing that his pension is going to be taken, his Social Security disbursement or his company pension, what have you, but being able to offer a reasonable settlement or, being able to offer a negotiated settlement like that is quite enlightening.
Yes, it is definitely possible. The only thing I don't like is how many people think that everybody could qualify for it, and it's not true. That's not true. Not everybody can qualify, but if you meet the qualifications for it, it is a great, great program.
Well, Amanda, this has been very enlightening for me in terms of, what an enrolled agent is and the kinds of things that people can do if they incur a tax debt. I know you said this earlier, but let's repeat the information about how our listeners can get more information about you and what you offer.
Okay. Well, to get more information about myself, they can visit my website at wintheirsgame.com. They'll find out about me, they'll find out about my experience, and they'll find out about my book. On that website, they'll also can sign up for my newsletter, where I do quarterly newsletter releases, doing information on anything new that the IRS has come out with, any new deductions that you can take, or even deductions that may have been taken away. They can also sign up to get a free chapter from the book. That way they can really see what is in the book before they have to commit. I also have a tax blog on there that offers information regarding if they don't want to sign up for the newsletter, they can go to the blog and they can do a search for, I have questions on marital deductions, or I have questions on children, or I have questions on, can I take this deduction? They can get information there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Amanda, for being a guest on the radio today. And I'd like to thank all the listeners for joining us today on Ultimate Authorities Radio. And as I like to tell people, go learn stuff. Thanks again for listening.
You've been listening to Main Street Mavericks Radio with Donna Gunter. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit mainstreetmavericks.com.